Hey everyone, welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bacasa, and the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast aims to bring the best stories and tips. Stories and tips from those that truly make an impact within the sport of fly fishing. I'll dig into the past, present, and future of our guests, uncovering their amazing story and journey. Join me each week as I interview a new guest from somewhere around the globe. If you're not yet a subscriber, help by subscribing now so I can attract the most influential guests and sponsors to the podcast. Let's make this the top fly fishing specific podcast available. Today's show is brought to you by the following sponsors. Angler's Coffee, a brand of coffee for anglers by anglers. Owner Joan Monahan grew up fly fishing, and after spending 40 years in the coffee industry, perfecting blend and brew process, he retired to creating a coffee blend and brand for the sport of his passion. Go to www.anglerscoffee.com and pick up a bag of your choice. My personal favorite is the pre-ground caddis blend. It has a perfect balance of body, aroma, and acidity to kickstart my day. Thank you, Anglers Coffee, for supporting the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. We look forward to supporting you and your business. Again, www.anglerscoffee.com. Dupa Fish, that's D-U-P-E-A fish.com, www.dupafish.com. Coming soon, but head over now, pre-register, and make sure you are ready to receive all the notices of the great deals that we'll be having coming your way. With years of accumulated DIY, Todd and I have traveled and booked experience all over the globe. We know how hard it is to customize a trip to you and your group's particular needs. We will have a comprehensive list of service providers and guides to help you in selecting the perfect trip for your and your party's needs. Book a trip with us and have the adventure of a lifetime. That's Dupa Fish, www.dupafish.com. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. This is your host, Christian Bacasa, and today we have a very special guest, someone I met over LinkedIn and have followed in a professional manner and has really inspired me in numerous ways, and that's Chad Brown. Chad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's really good to get you on. I've, as mentioned, we connected, I think, almost 2 years ago on LinkedIn, and I kept following your posts, et cetera, and really loved what I saw, especially from a creative standpoint, and then more so from what you're doing with Soul River Inc., which is a nonprofit organization. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that just to get started?
Yeah, for sure. Founded the organization, and the mission of the organization, Soul River Inc., is is merging at-risk kids, especially kids of color in the city, with veterans, combat vets. And basically we bring both worlds together, where that veteran serves that kid, brings leadership, confidence, build confidence on the water while teaching and engaging fly fishing, and building up the environmental justice of issues that are happening on our waters that are at threat, our wildlife, public lands, etc. And in exchange, those kids, the youth, basically gives veterans purpose to push forward. Simple,
Yeah.
it's an exchange of relationship, exchange of community. One serves one another, and like an iron sharpening iron process on the water.
That is really cool. I mean, you're literally making the hair on my arm stand up. It sounds like an incredible cause, and I love how it's a two-way street, right? You're helping these
Yeah.
kids out, and you're really giving them that structure that a lot of people receive in the military as veterans, and yet then the kids are giving back just from that youthful standpoint and encouragement and seeing that growth, et cetera. It's just fantastic, man. So how did you get started in this? What was the impetus for you?
Uh, you know, um, I, through circumstances of my life that's taken a turn in my life, me getting diagnosed with PTSD, and even before that, me spiraling down and losing my job, and finding myself even homeless in the streets of Portland. The unfolds of trials and tribulations led me to a couple people in my life that took me to the river and showed me, how fishing supported them and helped them when they were going through their issues. And I started to put two and two together, and right behind me at that time, I was on the Clackamas River right here in Oregon, and behind me there was a fishing shop, and so I went there and got my first rod, went out there and cast out once or two times and hooked in on the jack salmon for the first time in my life. And then I was hooting and hollering, which, this been 4 or 5 years of me being heavy on heavy medications that the VA was giving me. So those 4 or 5 years are like a walking zombie
Yeah.
until when I hooked it on that fish. I was excited, and my excitement, I felt for a very long time. It's been a long time for me to feel the wind on my cheeks, and felt like the medicine, those medications that I was taking was like oozing out of my pores as my excitement was filling me up, and so I started to feel alive at that moment. I feel awake, woke. In the moment, and me realizing where I was at, and I felt good. And so I went back to the docs, and the docs basically wrote me a prescription, like to get into the outdoors more, fish more, and as long as you fish more, we'll taper you down on your meds, and you can, maintain your group therapy. And that's what I did as my agreement with them. And the more I fish, I end up creating a community, a really interesting community. This community was a mix of anglers and conservationists and hunters and farmers and scientists. I was very fortunate to kind of make my path led me weave, and actually it weaves me in and out of many different um, interesting souls that kind of came to my need to help me at a time that I needed help, and that help turned into my community tied to the river. And so over a course of years, me cultivating my skill set and bettering my skill set on the water as an angler led me into growing responsibly as a conservationist, and also as an advocate for our fresh waters, and especially for our community of veterans and our youth. And through a lot of different conversations and dialogues that I had with this community, which it wasn't just about fishing, which was my main learning of a mentor. It was more about the journey and how we take in life, and how life gives us. The challenges, and how we have to learn how to overcome those challenges. And that was my way of learning how to fly fish through the mentoring of my community, and where I am today, which is what led me to launch Soul River Inc., um, which is, what the mission is connecting with our veterans and our youth. But I also, and not a stranger to the outdoors, because I was brought up in the outdoors as a young kid,
Mm-hmm.
but more from a hunting standpoint. I come from a family of
Okay.
hunters and farmers, and so the outdoors has always been in my soul. But I became disconnected over life through many trials and errors and military, etc. And it brought me back to the outdoors. Actually came back, presented back to me in the form of fishing, and fly fishing. So, but yeah.
That is really cool. When you were in your youth, you were hunting, etc. Was that a family activity? Was that your father, mother, etc.? How did that really impact you as a young man?
My upbringing is very eclectic and very different, and I'll say that because the fact that I'm me as an African American male, my I didn't come from the urban streets that you hear of the typical stories. I was literally raised on a ranch. My family owns a ranch in Texas,
Okay.
on land, and so. my upbringing was around rodeos, black rodeos. Actually, my family was into the black rodeos. My father and my grandfather owns acres of land, and we would go out. We would hunt white-tailed deer, and we would hunt turkey. And my father would raise cows and bulls and take them to the auction
Hmm.
and to the market, and so that was my huge big upbringing. And so going hunting was like, yeah, it's like a father son relationship. My father taught me how to hunt. I was around my grandpa. He taught me how to hunt as well. I got my first rifle when I was age 7. And but at the same time, my mom also taught me archery. My mom was deeply into the outdoors. She's an artist in the
Uh-huh.
theater and everything. And so I also learned how to shoot bow and arrow, and which was it was the support and the teachings from my mother. And to this day, I'm more of an archer than someone to actually pick up a rifle to go hunting. But my later in my life, I was a little bit getting out of control, but that was the way my mom actually kept me in control. And she put a bow in my hand, and she would take me to the range, and I would sit right by her and watch her, and she'll show me the form, how to shoot, how to breathe, etc. And I was trained on traditional archery, and
Yeah.
so even today, that's what I shoot with traditional archery with the recurve bow and long bow as well.
Okay. It sounds like the way that you describe it, there was quite a bit of just lifestyle or life practice mentoring in a lot of that as well. Do you agree?
I'm sorry, say that one more time, please.
It sounds like the way you describe it that there was a lot of lifestyle and like life practice mentoring going on with your parents, grandfather, and etc. Is
Yeah,
it?
yeah, absolutely. The family that I, feel very blessed to have, there was a lot of mentoring. That My father spent a lot of time with me, and same thing with my mom. I spent a lot of time in the outdoors. My summers was filled with, hunting all the time and farming, and also watching my dad work the land and watching my dad even wrestle bulls on Sunday afternoons, entertaining the family. We'd
Right.
have big family outings, and
Yeah, that's
it's kind of
awesome.
crazy, but
Yeah.
yeah, and one of my big childhood, I guess, memories that I have, which is probably very unique, is my dad was out hunting with my grandfather, and he came across a mother deer that was dead, and the baby fawn was by the deer, and my father picked up the fawn and brought the fawn home, and I ended up raising that fawn. That fawn was like my pet
Yeah.
basically, and I was literally the only kid. No joke. It's kind of crazy because if you can have a visual here, is a visual mind. When we get ready to go to the grocery store and go into town, my mom allowed me, and she just gave me the space for me to enjoy my childhood. And so I would literally put a dog leash on my deer and put my deer in the back of the car, and we would go to the grocery store, and I would walk into the grocery store with my deer on a dog leash.
Oh
Period.
gosh. What was the deer's name?
Oh yeah, it's kind of funny, but the deer's name was Bambi.
Bambi. All right, I like it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I can only imagine that this deer was known by everybody in the township.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I brought that deer into grocery stores, and I brought Bambi into the school for show and tell. Bambi slept with me at night. I mean, we were, inseparable.
That is awesome.
But yeah, that was one of the biggest highlights of my childhood, that my parents allowed me to keep and allowed me to explore in that way, and they didn't stop me, and so they supported me that way, as far as having what I wanted. That was natural and genuine, and for me to grow. It was kind of like my world being protected.
Yeah.
And my father was he understood the outdoors was very, very important, and wildlife, and they allowed me. Unfortunately, with hindsight, looking back, we didn't really know the damage that we was doing to the deer.
Yeah.
And none of us didn't know that. And I look back at that, because I did have to let the deer go. The deer actually grew so big that Bambi could not live in the house no more, and so we had to got to the point where we had to let him go. So we did not realize what we were doing like that, and of course, we tend to make our mistakes and we live and learn,
That's right.
but
You know, you're trying to do the right thing, and sometimes you don't. But hey, you do. You learn lessons through that, and who
yeah,
knows what it would have done on the other end, right? Without
right,
having you guys.
exactly.
So, yeah, great point. It sounds like you know, quite a bit of your conservation background came from that as well. Um, can you kind of talk a little bit about your passions around conservation as well?
Yeah, yeah, I guess that was the early stages of my interests, or early stages of conservation. Little did I know what conservation meant, being that young.
Hmm.
Um, but the maturity and growth as I grew up and got older and, went through life and then coming, tapering down to what has happened to me with my, PTSD stuff and then how fly fishing came back into my life and brought me connected to the outdoors. And through the outdoors, it opened up a community where a lot of folks in that community was on came at share with me their ideas of conservation on many different levels, from our fish to our wildlife to environmental issues, etc. And you know, to me, conservation, I guess, for the um, the knowledge that I was able to attain and what was taught to me, that has turned into my own thoughts, is that conservation starts off with the conversation first, and it's about people, and also not just about our wildlife and public lands or fresh water. It's also about people. It's about educating um, people, especially people that are disconnected from the outdoors. The more that we can educate and start having these conversations, especially in a diverse world, it starts to open up more of interest and dialogue, and starts to show more love to why we are protecting our wildlife or our fresh water, or protecting our public lands. Before we can show that why and that stand, we have to have that conversation first. And so
Hmm.
conservation to me is about the cultivating of our communities first, and bringing them into the fold, and applying grace and patience for one another, to have, due to the fact that people may not understand, and so that acquires a great discipline to the person who is trying to save our wildlife, our public lands.
Yeah.
That acquires a different type of discipline to that same person to step out of themselves, to step into a grace space, and allow that space for growth and learning for other people. So
Hmm.
what I'm saying is, like, the conservation is about the investment into how you cultivate and connect with your community first. And when you can rise up and connect with your community first on a diversity level, you are then able to lead that horse to water and allow that horse to drink.
Yep.
Period.
Yep.
But if you can't do that, then you can't expect someone to love what you love, which is our fishing, our fish, our wildlife, and public lands. You can't expect someone to do that. You can't expect someone to take a stand, and you can't expect someone to really respect the area that you are respecting, and that you love so much, until you're able to instill the education piece into that space,
Right.
basically.
Right. They have to see it through your eyes.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
I mean, it's, you really think about, like our Public Lands Act, for example, the forethought of those people really kind of setting apart these wilderness areas and establishing a place and recognizing like the value that comes out of these areas for us in so many
Right.
unique ways, but it's different for every person. So
It is
until you can
totally
have
different.
that conversation and really share that light, you're comparing apples to oranges. So I
Right.
really like how you position that, investing in the community first by conversation. I like that. Let's talk a little bit about two other items here that caught my attention. One, when you started fishing, you mentioned, "Hey, I went out and I got that first hookup, went back, saw the doctor, and then I got back into this mentoring group." How did you find these mentors? How did you get engaged into this group of people that really kind of started to help you turn the corner per se?
I can't really say how, but I'm a big believer in if you trying to do right and walk the right way and just do the right thing for people and mean well. I believe like your stars will align
Hmm.
in like-minded people. It would attract the like-minded people that will come to you and support you. And I think even though that I was down on my luck and down in a really really hardship in my life, but I felt like my heart was in the right place um, where I was wanting to. I allowed myself to open up to what's to come at me or to me. That I felt that was right in alignment in what I needed help for,
Hmm.
meaning that a lot of us have a hard time asking for help. A lot of us has a hard time of opening up and being vulnerable in spaces that may make us feel very very uncomfortable, and maybe it's because my circumstances that I was dealing with and where I was at, and even though I was homeless and giving blood every 2 weeks just to get money in my pocket, it didn't allow me to feel embarrassed.
Hmm.
But what it did do for me was I just became very open, and I didn't have a problem asking for help. And so I think, through me, through a lot of prayer, a lot of walking on faith, and opening myself up, and me asking for the right help came towards me, and me being humble, it allowed me also to be extremely humble, and I was in a place kind of like a pupil all over again, and I think people saw that in me, other than just seeing me as a wounded veteran, but I think they saw much more deepness into me of that I needed the help. I'm humble to take the help, and I think through that it showed my good intentions of
Hmm.
what I wanted to try to accomplish or do. And at that time, to accomplish and do was me just really wanting to rise and live, to be acknowledged of my existence of who I am in society, because a lot of our veterans don't get that kind of treatment, and a lot of us go unseen or unheard, and a lot of us doesn't have the homecoming that's actually needed, and that homecoming is not like a welcome home, but it's really more like acknowledgement and seeing you. I see you. Can I hug you, etc.
Yeah.
And so I think through circumstances I had to learn and be vulnerable and open myself up, and it just became, I guess, it became attractive to bringing in the right kind of people to help me. I feel very, it's not lucky, it's a blessing,
Yep. Yeah.
it's a lot of blessings came my way, and many walks of life that has helped me get from point A to point B, where I'm at today.
Yeah. And mentorships like that, I think, Chad, you described it pretty well, right? Very mentors aren't, they don't typically seek out people to, guide, et cetera, or help. But when somebody comes to them and they're hungry for it and you can feel that, that's where you feel like your value is really going, right? And then all of a sudden you attach like, oh man, this guy really is going to take to heart what I'm trying to help them with, or where I'm trying to guide them, et cetera. And if they're absorbing that, man, it just makes it all that much more valuable. So
Right.
yeah, appreciate that perspective too. So you grow up through your youth. You're into hunting. You do some fishing. Then how did you get involved in the military? How did that pan out? And then let's talk a little bit of fishing after that.
Yeah. Just circumstance of me um, being in college and not able to finish school due to financial issues, and so I ended up joining the military, and
And it
didn't
was
want
it
to
was the
bug my
Navy,
mom.
right? If I recall.
Yeah, yeah, joined the Navy, and didn't really want to bug my mom and my father about money because they didn't really have the money to help me, and so I needed to. It was a time for me. I actually needed to, find my own path, and I felt that was the decision that I made. My father served, and at one point in my life, I wasn't really interested in going into the military, but it got me into but you know, due to circumstances and financial hardship of college and not able to finish college, that was an option. And I went ahead and made that choice and joined, really for to get the GI Bill,
Hmm.
and so I ended up serving in the Navy and end up serving in Desert Storm in Operation Restore Hope. Did my time coming out, and end up taking advantage of the GI Bill, and that ended up helping me through my undergraduate schooling, and then also that I was able to maximize that out to my graduate studies out of New York, and yeah, that's yeah, and I ended up going to school for photography, creative direction, visual communication design. I ended up getting my master's, in that field, and ended up doing a lot of work in New York, in Hong Kong, pretty much all over the world, as a creative slash photographer.
And then you ended up ultimately in Portland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ultimately, I ended up in Portland from a job that hired me out as a senior art director for an ad agency in Portland, and so I came out here. Actually, I came out here because I actually took a break and I took a trip to Japan and backpacked through Japan for a month, basically trying to figure some stuff out. And that was actually the early stages of me having some issues
Hmm.
mentally and not really understanding what was going on. And then when I came back to New York, I got this job offer and ended up going out to Portland, Oregon, taking on this new job as a senior art director for this agency. And then that's when things started to get worse for me. And that's when things started to kind of go south with me. And that's how I end up spiraling down and getting diagnosed with PTSD
Yeah.
and realized what I was going through and everything like that. But yeah.
Yeah. It's a scary situation. I can only imagine. I mean, I don't have experience with it, but it's, it's gotta feel like you're out of control, I would assume. And was there an aha moment for you where you realized, hey, look, I got a problem. Something's going on.
No, it happened pretty fast. Um, I think, I'm not gonna say it happened fast. It happened slow, but very, very aggressive, and um, to a point where I was just it just turned my world upside down.
Yeah.
I didn't know um, what was going on with me,
Okay.
other than I was aware that I was having a lot of mental issues and a lot of anxiety and depression. A lot of things was happening, but I didn't quite have my finger on to what was happening with me until a friend directed me and helped me go to the VA, and that's when I started to go through my process of at the VA and with doctors, and that's when things started to come to more of a head of clarity that what I was dealing with was PTSD.
Hmm. Okay. Hmm. Well, kudos to you for being able to have the people around you to help you through that, and yourself the mental fortitude to get through that, Chad. It's something to be very proud of. So I'm glad to have you on the show today. This has been great learning a lot about you. Let's talk a little bit about fishing now.
Sure.
Your group takes young kids out fishing. You've got to have some stories from that. Why don't you give us a story about one of the locations that you've gone to?
Within my organization, we merge our youth and our veterans, on these fly fishing excursions, which we call them deployments. And deployments, and why we call them deployments, because we have a veterans. It's a veteran and youth program together, and we call them deployments because it's kind of like just like it is a war term,
Hmm.
and in our eyes as an organization, it's an environmental justice term, and meaning that we identify places throughout the U.S. that are at threat, and whatever our wildlife, our fresh water, or whatever that's environmentally of an impact that's affecting it negatively, that becomes our ground zero of a deployment. And so when we identify these deployment areas, we deploy our youth and our veterans into teams.
Okay.
And they go into these areas as a team. And while they're as a team, they're also tasked, the youth are tasked to develop various research based on the issues that are happening there that's tied to our fresh water and our wildlife. Tied into that, we're also partnering with also conservation groups that are doing the work to help support these areas or fight for these areas or to take a stand, and that needs new voices from a
Hmm.
veteran standpoint and also from a youth standpoint.
Okay.
And so through this research that we do and the youth do, they're taught to bring their research into a classroom setting on the river. And when they bring that classroom setting on the river, us veterans take a step back and we're the pupil to the youth, and the youth becomes the teacher. And so there's through our agenda throughout that day, we have also the fly fishing, which is weaved into our curriculum while we are developing community on the river.
Okay.
And so our fishing is not just about the fishing going after fish. Our fishing is about the leadership and how we can foster and incubate community on the river, and also catching and learning about the river and our fish species that we're going after. And so the ultimate goal, while we are fly fishing and engaging with the youth and veterans, our ultimate goal is not just to spend a day on the river to fish,
Right.
is to spend a day to grow a young leader to help take a stand to support and protect our fish and protect our wildlife. And so we are on a mission to grow leaders of environmental ambassadors that will become our next potentially our next judge or our next congressional member
Right.
or our next biologist,
Or just
and that's what we call it.
conversationalists, like you were saying before, right? They start having
Absolutely.
conversation about it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's for folks that goes to fish and fly fish and goes on really awesome, excursions, etc. with guides. That's there's nothing wrong with that, and that's great. And there's people, they'll drop a lot of money. We do the same, except we're not on a mission to go after this grand, great fish. We're on a mission to cultivate leadership on the water.
Hmm.
That's what we're on. That's what we're trying to do here. So we do go to these really extreme places. These deployments takes us everywhere from the Florida Everglades to the Gila River to Mexico, all the way up to the Arctic Circle, to where we're doing 200 to 300 miles of river run on these waters. But what we're doing is cultivating leadership. We're cultivating, integrating, inserting ourselves into sensitive areas where these areas needs a voice. We also partner, even through our fishing, is tied into indigenous communities.
Mm.
When we go to the Arctic, we reach and we marry or partner up with the most northern tribe up into the top of the circle, which you can't go no further, which is the Gwich'in community. They themselves are hunters or fishermen, and we take a stand right there on the riverbank with them, learn those waters as they learn, and that's how they teach us their ways. The more they teach us their ways and teach these youth their ways, we call this cultural interaction, cultural relations. This encourages and grows our young people to become stronger advocates for these wild spaces.
Hmm.
And so constantly, that's kind of like how our programs built. We integrate and weave fly fishing in and out, but we never teach about going after that one big fish and that prize and take that photo. What we teach is leadership, and we cultivate these youth to get them to see the importance of why we need to protect these waters, why we need to protect these fish, why we need to protect this land, etc., and why we need to take a stand with our indigenous brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
which is very critical and very important, because they're First Nations, and we need to acknowledge that and understand what that's all about. And
Yep.
but yeah, so that's from a fishing standpoint, from a fly fishing standpoint. That's how we that's how we move through these waters from Soul River Inc.
Yeah.
And that's how these veterans help support, and they take a stand along with these youth. And I think from a veteran standpoint, the fishing is the vehicle, but the vehicle leads us to healing and finding out healing on the waters, such as combat vets, etc. And it's that exchange of working through conversations and relationship on the water to the youth. And when that youth ends up responding back to that veteran as we're standing on the water, they're responding and giving us purpose on the water. And so it's definitely more of a humanity effort and humanity injection into the river while we are fishing. And the ultimate goal is healing and advocacy and leadership.
Yeah. And the reality is, I mean, you want to develop different perspectives, right? So that we
Yeah.
can learn from each other. And what I really liked about what you said was, it's not for you guys, it's not the hero shot, it's not the catching the big fish, etc. And for so many anglers, that's what it is about. And
Yeah.
there's a respect for that as well.
Right.
But what's really cool is how you described, look, we're working with these native groups, these locals, etc., to preserve these areas. And the fact is, if we don't have the preservation and the conservation, those hero shots don't exist anymore. And we've seen that on
Exactly.
other rivers. So very cool, Chad. This has been extremely enjoyable for me, quite a learning experience in the first half of this show. What I'd like to do is take a minute to hear from our sponsors here. And when we get back, I want to hear a story from you about one of the adventures that you've had or you've maybe witnessed with one of your mentors taking on one of these young youths and something that you saw of it that was just pretty amazing. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. We'll be right back, everyone. Angler's Coffee. We love fueling your next cast. We've been roasting coffee before coffee was cool. www.anglerscoffee.com. Dupa Fish. Coming soon. Pre-register now and get notified. www.dupafish, that's D-U-P-E, a fish.com. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. This is Christian Bacasa, your host. And today we've got Chad Brown, a U.S. Navy veteran, on the line with Soul River Inc., which is a nonprofit organization bringing together veterans and our youth from inner city areas or troubled youth, etc. A great program. Chad, it's been great getting to know you. And I do want to remind our listeners, if you enjoy the show, please subscribe to our podcast, tell your friends, and more importantly, go on and leave a review. Leave a review for us on your Apple Podcast, your Spotify, etc. That really helps us grow and get great guests like Chad on the show. So, Chad, before we took the break, I asked you to kind of put together a story around maybe one of the mentoring aspects of your group, and, how it applied and what you really got out of it. Why don't you fire away?
Yeah, when we're out on our deployments, the veterans are the mentors and our life coaches, for our youth. And every day, when our youth basically, have they present their research in their class out there, at camp by the river. Um, we become the pupils of the students to the youth now. And, and then after, the class is over, given by the youth, the veteran steps in and to give a life lesson. Every day there's a life lesson from a veteran. Every veteran that's out there has a life lesson they have to put together and present to the youth after that, and through that life lesson, that veteran takes the stage and takes like anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour to explain and share this life lesson uh, to educate our youth and maybe to some of us veterans as well, because we're constantly learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So they work really close with the youth, and it becomes like a big brother, big sister type of relationship, and it carries itself even when we get back home from our deployments, here in Portland, Oregon. It just doesn't stop when we're out of when we come back, it's ongoing. And
Mm-hmm.
so you find the youth and veterans staying connected. The veterans insert themselves into the youth's lives. The veterans is ongoing, taking them fishing all the time, and they're there for the youth, And so, one of the stories I could think of is showing how that glue of that veteran and youth relationship becomes. Is I had a youth that came back from a deployment, and that youth end up making their own decision. That one day they came back, went home, they made their own decision, ended up going to a grocery store, and that decision led them into stealing, and they stole something, ran out the store, and cops, the security guard ran after that young youth, and the youth turned around and hit the security guard, and got away. So there's another count against him. So the youth ended up getting called later, and immediately getting put into the system in jail. And the youth was having a court date, and so the mom reached out to me and says, this is what happened, to my son, and I'm not sure what you can do, but if you can do anything, we can use your help, and maybe you could speak on his character of who he really is, because you got to get to know him, and my son that was on the deployment, etc. And I said yes, yeah. I said yeah, I do my best, and so when the court date came around, I showed up. I sent an email out to the community of veterans. And when that date showed up, that room was filled with 15 veterans. And those veterans came up to that youth's behalf to take a stand, to talk about this youth's character, and to try to convince the judge to give him a second chance.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge was really moved by the room of veterans standing up for this young kid. And that judge, basically came out of his chambers, and or came down from his seat, and sat down and told the young man, I hope you understand and see what's going on, because this is something that I don't see all the time, especially to a young African American young man as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Many young men that comes through that's made some bad decisions don't have a community, and they don't have the love. And right now, you have a community, and these veterans, including your mother, is right here, and they're taking a stand for you. And this is something I need to think deeply about, because I'm torn at the fact that what you did was wrong, but at the same time, now I'm in a position where I actually can rip you or take you away from a community that actually loves you, and you actually need this community. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm going to do is give you one more chance. I'm going to give you a second chance. And I want you to understand the love that you have. And I want you to understand that there are people here that are supporting you, and you need to see that and understand that. And so the judge had a long pep talk with that kid in the courtroom around all these veterans and his mother. And the judge basically ruled and gave him a second chance, and gave him some light duty that he had to do, and he stayed amongst these veterans and mom. And today he has graduated from Portland State University, and he's in his own profession as a teacher. And so it's the relationship and the mentorship is highly important for our today's youth, and especially for youth of color that comes from really extreme broken backgrounds, etc. Because it's the choices that a lot of these young people make is sometimes they can be bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
And
We all make
and
mistakes.
and we all make mistakes.
Yep.
And, but the most important thing is community and the power of community and the power of how love is used to help support one another and help that person. And when we don't have that kind of love in our community, and that love of strangers, meaning that it's not the love that I'm talking about, that you find in a marriage or relationship. I'm talking about the type of love that acquires or will take a stranger that doesn't know who you are, but is willing to take a step up for you and your well-being and be there for you. And that's the love I'm talking
Yeah.
about, and that's the love that these veterans are capable of doing,
It's
even though they
civil
know
care.
that yeah, exactly, they care,
It's,
and so
and it's your
when you
civil,
have that kind of
there is a
support.
civil duty around that, right? That we
Absolutely.
should all embrace.
Absolutely, absolutely, I think if we did that more for one another, we can probably see a lot much more changes in our communities and how we work together, how we live together, how we move through life together. Because especially today, there's just so much toxic stuff happening on
Yeah.
so many levels, and we're affected by it all. But really, all that toxic stuff, it comes from the doings of humanity,
Hmm.
people,
Yeah.
and if we had a way to love those people that's even putting out that toxic, we would probably have healthier and better, stronger communities. And really, the end of the day, those same people are actually seeking. They're seeking love. They just don't know how to obtain it, and they don't know how to ask for it.
Yep. And fly fishing's the perfect catalyst for that, in my
Right.
opinion. It really is. There's an art to it. There's a lot of patience involved in it. There's the mentoring aspect. There's the excitement and enjoyment. There's the never-ending journey in learning, etc. I mean, it just really is a amazing catalyst for that kind of approach. So, great story, Chad. That's quite amazing to hear that. And good on you guys for stepping up. And I'm glad it turned out really well for that boy there.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about some of your trips. You recently got back, I think, just a few days ago from the Arctic. You were up there for quite a while. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, I was up there for just about a whole month up in the Arctic Circle. I was guiding Soul River Inc. youth and veterans up in the Attican Gorge area, and going after grayling and Arctic lake trout as well up there. And then and also I was guiding uh, 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 two groups of BIPOC leaders from all over the U.S. basically into that same area of integrating fishing and outdoor leadership in wild spaces.
And what's going on up there from a conservation standpoint that you're aware of, and why that area?
So the Arctic Refuge, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, is basically the land is at threat due to the potential of leasing and the selling of the refuge of the Arctic. And there's an area called the 1002 area that's just very sensitive area, but that area is coming under a heavy states of lease to sell that land for drilling, and the sensitivity to that area it's tied to the Gwich'in Nation, and the Gwich'in are the people of the land. They're the people of the caribou, and the caribou is very very important to the Gwich'in people, and the 1002 area is the calving birthing grounds of the caribou. It's where the caribou migration starts. And also the birth of the caribou, and from the Gwich'in's lens and mindset, they consider that area that area that the government calls the 1002 area is the place where life begins.
Mm.
And so if you dismantle and start to drill in that area, you're killing off a migration of the caribou that starts every year there.
Mm.
On top of that, you're wiping out the Gwich'in Nation because they are the people of the caribou. And so you're wiping out a race at the same time.
Wow.
And so it's very, very sensitive up in the Arctic, and that land is pristine. It's the most, well, it's the last of what we have that's untouched by man, other than the Dalton Highway that goes all the way up there in Prudhoe Bay, which is called Dead Horse now.
Mhm.
Because that's where a lot of the oil industry is drilling and stuff. But anything outside of that, and that, I think it's like 88,000 or 77,000 of acres or something like that of land. It's a massive amount of land, and it's a massive wild space. It's home to grizzly bears. It's home to muskox,
Yeah.
wild muskox roaming through. Homes to eagles and the moose and the wolves, the gray wolves, the timber wolves, etc. And so it's very much of a wild, untamed place that needs to be left alone, and it needs to be left alone also for the Gwich'in Nation to continue with their living and their lifestyle connected to this land. They are the people of the Arctic, including the Nupiat. The Nupiat, they're up there in Kotovik, and there's a bunch of a Nupiat that's also supporting with the Gwich'in people, and which is very, very, it's a very serious deal. And so from a veteran standpoint, I bring vets up there through Soul River Inc. And the veterans always, they consider the Arctic home. When you talk to a veteran at Soul River, they tell you, when are we going home? And home is code to, when are we going to the Arctic Refuge? It's a sensitive place. It's a healing place, and it's a very magical place. It's one of these places where you can walk this land, and you can still find prehistoric skeletons of dinosaurs that's still there. It's magical. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Gosh.
And to one that doesn't understand the sensitivity, and to people, because obviously, you don't believe in, some people may say, I don't believe in climate change and everything, but you know what? If you ever get a chance and opportunity to someone who had naysayer, to go up there and go to ground zero and walk that land, I can give you 10, 15 minutes. In 10 to 15 minutes, you become a believer of climate change.
Yeah.
You will walk that land and you will understand what's going on, and you will see. Now, the people that I brought up there were, a lot of them newbies, and a lot of them were some naysayers and everything. But I said, let's take a walk. Number one, walking the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge has no trails. There's no trails on that land. So the motto, or the saying up there in the Arctic, is, however the land speaks to you is how you choose to walk that land, period. And okay, so it's immediately a bushwhack wild space.
Yeah.
And so you walk this tundra, and I'll tell people, like, let's take a walk, and let's walk the tundra, follow me, separate yourself, etc. And each person got a 30, 40-pound backpack on, etc. We got our rods and all this kind of stuff. And we're going to take a walk. And I said, a mile later, not even a mile, I'm going to say half a mile in, probably even less than that, you're huffing and you're puffing.
Right.
It doesn't matter how athletic you are, and what's going on is that you're walking on tundra, and it's like walking on tundra in the Arctic. It's like walking on a waterbed, and
Yep.
the land is moving like a waterbed, and it's crazy.
Mhm.
And it used to be frozen land, you know. And so when you look at, everybody knows, if you do your research and your studies, what a tundra is frozen land. It's frozen land up in the Arctic, and it's dealing with, the water and everything like that. But the thing, due to climate change and due to the melting, the melting frost, etc., the permafrost, excuse me, and
Mhm.
everything like that, that land is moving underneath your feet. And so it's like literally standing on a waterbed, and you're walking that land, and land is just constantly moving under your feet, and it's melting.
Mhm.
It's literally melting underneath your feet.
Yeah, and even
Yeah.
even if you aren't a believer, I think a lot of those areas, when you go, you may not, even if you leave still not being a believer, but you leave understanding that this is a precious area. And if there's a chance of something happening to it, gosh, I should just take the right step in the right direction to try and help. They're such
Yeah.
amazing places. So really cool.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Even if you're non-believer, but you're gonna probably walk out trying to figure out, scratching your head, why.
Yep. Yep.
You know, you're gonna be scratching your head. Why is this happening? This is crazy. It's just common sense.
Yep.
The thing is that if you're disconnected from something, and especially you're down in the lower 48, and you say it's not affecting you, of course, you don't see it every day, right? It's not in your world. You are getting affected by it some kind of way, but it's just not in your face. But if you actually go to ground zero and walk it, you now put things in perspective.
Yep.
Now we can have a deeper conversation. But so the land is eroding. It's eroding. Villages are moving. I've been working with the Gwich'in Nation over 8 years now, and their village moves. They have to move their village, and they got to constantly move. The migration, if you look at the migration patterns of the caribou, the great migration is not the same pattern as it was even last year.
Right.
It changes over, because the fact that due to the permafrost melting, and the climate change issues and stuff like that, and so it's still a place of wonder, and it's still a place to adventure, but it's also a place that can bring tears to the eyes, and because you start to realize how important, the Arctic Refuge is, and how delicate it is, and how it is affecting everything else in the lower 48, because it is considered as the refrigerator of the world. And when you got the refrigerator thawing out, then you got a lot of issues starting to happen, which is what we have today on many different issues coming to the lower 48.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Hey, before I forget, how do our listeners find out more about Soul River Inc.? Is it best to go to the website?
Yeah, you can go to soulriverinc.org, and there's a donate button right on the website.
Okay.
And we're always looking for someone to donate. Of course, raising money for our programs is priority number one for us. And we're also, if anyone's interested who wanted to volunteer their time, we're constantly looking for volunteers, especially with educated backgrounds, such as teaching and working with youth and coaching, or even science background, etc. That's very important, but also we'll take almost any kind of volunteer that's willing to help, because there's many different opportunities within the organization, from teaching to working with veterans and youth, fundraising, etc. Yeah.
Okay. So Soul River Inc. And then if a lot of our listeners are Instagrammers, et cetera, is there an Instagram page as well?
Yeah, you can just Soul River Inc. That you can find is Soul River Inc.
And then do you have a personal page? I know you have some amazing images.
Yeah, you can follow me on my personal page, which is Chad_Brown.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about some of the fishing. When you're up there in the Arctic, what kind of rigs were you carrying around and fishing with?
Well, yeah, I fish with the spey. I'm a spey angler, and so I'm usually working with I would say a 7 weight. It takes sometimes a 6 weight to a 7 weight, 13.5 foot spey, and and I use almost any kind of fly up there. I mean, I've everything from streamers, leeches to even top water flies. It seems like everything works up there.
So little
they
pressure,
don't really
right?
Yeah, it's very low pressure. Yeah, and so you can hook in I think you can throw a spider out in the water. You hook it on a grayling, but but yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be pretty interesting. The grayling picking those up on the spey line, and they hit on top too.
Say it one more time, please.
The grayling, they hit on top as well.
Yeah, you find some grayling hit on top. Yeah, it has to be the right conditions, of course, but a lot of times you can, throw some streamers out, colors, fuchsia, pinks, purples. You can definitely hook on grayling, streamers on the water and stuff like that. But yeah.
Very cool. So let's do this, Chad. I think let's hear one more time from our sponsors, then we'll come back, and I'd love to have you break down some of the ways to maybe head out on the river and prepare yourself to mentor youth and give some tips around that. Because I think a lot of our listeners, you have nephews or nieces or family friends that are younger people, and help them out and give them a few tips to put some mentoring aspects into their day of fishing. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. We'll be right back, everyone. Angler's Coffee. We love fueling your next cast. We've been roasting coffee before coffee was cool. www.anglerscoffee.com. Dupa Fish. Coming soon. Pre-register now and get notified. www.dupafish, that's D-U-P-E, fish.com. All right, everyone. We've got Chad Brown on the podcast today. Chad is with Soul River Inc., as we've described earlier, and is running a veteran in youth program. Chad, before we left, we talked about getting a few tips of advice on, how to mentor some young youth out on the river and set us up for a day of success in that realm.
Tips and advice on how to say it one more time, please.
Yeah, sure. Tips and advice on how to maybe put some things in your day or your repertoire of moves to mentor young youth when you're out on the river.
I really don't have tips and a lot of the tips, and I guess a lot of tips and advice. Really, I think probably the only thing I can speak to that is that you got to show up when it's time for you to show up, and when you show up, you have to lead from your heart and allow your heart to show the love that you have for your youth, who you speaking to, and be present and stay present in the moment with them. Period.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward, right? You gotta love what you're doing, pass that on, and I think it'll just come through naturally, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Chad, it's been really good having you on the podcast today. I've learned quite a bit. I think the Soul River Inc. cause is purely amazing, in all honesty. And I'd like to just kind of wrap up our session today. I'm going to read off from your website, the Soul River Code. So there's a couple items in the code. First is, I serve my community and my team with honor and integrity. Second, I am responsible for my actions and accountable to my leaders both on and off the water. Next, I lead my example. And then I am the guardian of the standard. Next, I lead by example for my community to which I guide in and the youth to which I serve. And last, I hold myself and my gear to the highest state of readiness. And I just love it, man. What you're doing is purely amazing. It's been great getting to know you. I hope to maybe someday meet up with you, go fishing with you, get to know you a little better in that regard as well. And wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the time and the opportunity. It's always a blessing and a great experience and to speak to new audiences, new crowds. And thank you for the welcoming on the platform. Really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you so much.
You got it. All right, everyone. Have a great week, and we will see you next week. Take care.